Just to put this into context, and people are so surprised, on my first month in business, obviously I was building my community, doing my podcast for a few months beforehand, but when I first launched, in that month, I made 10K in month one, and I had a small audience of like probably under 1,000 people at that time. So really, these business models are perfect for women who want more flexibility.
Welcome to More Than Mama, the podcast, where we dive into the highs and lows of motherhood and everything in between. The vibe here is coffee or a cocktail with friends meets interesting or inspirational TED Talk. I'm Bryony, an introvert mum coming out of my shell to ask the big questions about motherhood and beyond. Let's dive in. Welcome back to More Than Mama, the podcast, where we dive into all things motherhood and beyond. Today we are chatting to the amazing Suzanna Clark. Honestly, she's an absolute powerhouse. She originally worked in banking for one of the world's leading investment banks, JP Morgan, and she ditched that to move to Bali and start a business and live her dream, the stuff movies are made of. And in an era where the internet has empowered us to do so much and opened up a world of flexibility, also post-COVID, many of us have been craving that kind of freedom. And also, as mums, often we want to be able to be more present for our kids and not necessarily have our lives dictated by external employers. But many people want to have careers or do things for themselves or need to earn. And so in an era where the algorithm is trying to convince us that it's really easy to just suddenly generate 10K months, but there are a lot of charlatans out there who are trying to take your money and then tell you to just sell their template digital products, and it's a bit scammy. I think you need to be careful who you take your advice from. And so having credible experts who know what they are talking about and have strong backgrounds and expertise to really support people on that journey is critical. So if you are interested in entrepreneurship and flexible business and finding freedom, and I guess, it's a paradigm shift, isn't it? Designing work around the life you love rather than the other way around. Whether you want to be at home with your kids and just need to make a little bit of extra money, whether you've always dreamed of starting your own business and working for yourself. Suzanna is the founder of the Female Leadership Collective. She is an absolute boss in this area. She's also a retreat host, a podcast host. She works and coaches women one-to-one. She runs the super successful Launch Academy. She's a course creator. There is so much that you can take away from this. So yeah, wherever you're at on your journey and whatever it is you're interested in, there'll definitely be something in here for you. Full disclosure, I have also worked with Suzie in the past, and we were actually at school together for a very brief time. She's definitely much cooler than me. And then, she moved schools, but we also attended like an extracurricular creative writing, not like a retreat. It was like a residential course or something when we were teenagers. So we both very much always had that vibe and that interest, I guess. So yeah, that's a funny bit of background. And it was really nice to come full circle and get to have this chat today, because it was actually in kind of masterminding with her in kind of figuring out what direction I wanted to go that I was actually like, hey, I'd quite like to start a podcast. And if it hadn't been for her being like, yeah, I love that for you, definitely something you should do, I probably wouldn't have taken the plunge. So there we go. That's the longest introduction ever. Without further ado, Suzanna Clark, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yes, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's so great to have you. And for anyone who hasn't already come across who you are, what it is you do, could you just give us a little intro as to what you're all about?
Yeah, so I'm Suzie. I run Female Leadership Collective, which is a business that helps women leave their corporate careers and launch their own businesses. I also have retreats in Bali, and I'm sure we're going to go into all of that. I actually live in Bali. I have lived here for the last 4 years. Come from England, as you can tell from my accent, and I have a banking background. So I love that Bryony and I met when we went to school all those years ago, which is so wonderful, and we've reconnected. So yeah, I'm just super, super excited for this conversation and to delve into all of this stuff.
Winding back the clocks to how you got to where it is you are now, can you give a little bit of the story of how you moved from your corporate career across to Bali and working with high achieving women?
Yeah, so it's a whole story. But I think it's very similar to yours in a way, actually, in that, you know, got like without bragging, like just got very good grades at school, went to university, got a good grade in my degree, and was always that kind of person that kind of came quite naturally to me. But what then ended up happening is I just felt kind of that I ended up being funneled into working in finance. It was never really a
Mm.
conscious decision as to, oh, what's my dream job? What do I want to do? I just suddenly found myself there one day. And just to a lot of people, that might sound a little bit privileged, what like, you just found yourself in finance career or something. But actually, the problem with that was that it wasn't necessarily conscious to me. And it was just,
Mm.
okay, well, if you got this certain grade at school or at university, then that means that you need to go and work in this profession or this career because otherwise you're wasting your potential or whatever. It kind of felt
Mhm.
like there was this layer
Mhm.
of pressure to go and do that. And I wasn't allowed to almost consider any other option. So that was an interesting kind of like my first experience of like the societal pressure and conditioning and things like that. But unbeknown to me, I rock up to this finance career actually for JP Morgan, so one of the biggest investment banks in the world. And I loved it for the first year. I was like, wow, walking into this skyscraper every day in Canary Wharf in London, wearing like my trouser suit and all of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff and working with these high profile clients. And I just thought I'd made it and people were impressed and things like that. But then as the years went on, uh, I really realized how kind of bored I was, and I felt really quite miserable doing that job. And it's this weird paradox where you feel quite guilty about that as well, because you're in a really privileged
Mm.
position having one of these careers, and lots of people really, want that spot, but you're not enjoying it. Who are you to not enjoy that and not be grateful for that? And so it was like this real strange mix of like feeling awful, but then feeling even more awful because I was upset at myself for feeling that way. So at the same time, when you jump back to the societal conditioning, I still had that pressure of, well, I'm in this career, couldn't possibly leave. Like, what would I do? And anything
Right.
else, in my mind, that was one of the top things I could be doing. So anything else would be like a step down kind of thing. So I felt stuck, so stuck. And I eventually, well, I guess the feeling just got so unbearable that I had to do something about it. And all of that just went away because I was like, I just feel so unaligned, so miserable that I just need to leave. I just need to do something else. And I always wanted my own business, but I really struggled. Like, I know you hear of these people who, have that seamless transition of launching their business
Mm.
whilst they're working their 9 to 5, and then they get to the income level where they can quit their job. Perfect. But I just really found that my job was so high pressured, like being in sales, that I just didn't have the capacity to even think of anything else, even work on anything else. I was in kind of that a mindset of feeling so miserable that was preventing me from even being creative. So I really struggled to tap into any business ideas, start anything on the side whilst I was working my job. So I just got to the point where I saved up money, as I called it, my escape fund. And then I ended up quitting my job with no business idea, just a load of savings, sold everything, and moved to Bali just on a whim to figure it all out because I just had to do something radical like that. And I'm so happy that it did work out. But that's essentially the story. Do you want me to carry on from there? Because it is a long
Um,
one.
it is. No, it's amazing. I mean, just sort of thinking about that conditioning, it's actually quite incredible, isn't it? How you can be so unconsciously funneled in a direction. And then I think, like you say, you end up feeling guilty that you're not sort of thriving, because all of the images that you see of people in these kinds of careers, you're thinking it's going to be amazing, it's going to be like that movie montage where you're that really successful kind of
Yeah.
high achieving person. And then I think the guilt of also earning well and having a stable income, you can feel, why am I not loving my life? And I think it's a really interesting one as well,
Yeah.
isn't it? For any any woman who is in a job, in some kind of career, who wakes up one day and is thinking, actually, this isn't what I want to be doing, like where I want to be. So it's amazing that you eventually sort of took that leap and had that escape fund. I think so many people will be able to relate to having that feeling of needing to make a change. So when you got to Bali,
Mm.
what was kind of your next step? Because I know that actually it wasn't like you launched straight into your current business, was it? You still had a bit of a journey to getting to where you are now.
Yeah, that's right. And I think well, the thing is, when you first quit your job, what happens is you just get thrown into fight or flight, usually, because you're so used to having a paycheck. You're so used to having a salary come in on a certain time of the month. And you're so used to this kind of perceived security, which isn't really security, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I landed in Bali and I was just there was a bit of a honeymoon phase. So like I had enough savings for, I don't know, maybe in my head about 2 years worth of time. But obviously I wanted to start a business in that time so that the savings didn't run out because I didn't want to get
Right.
into that situation. But it was kind of humbling to begin with because I was budgeting and like not to sound, I don't know what the word is, like awful, but I was so fortunate in banking that I never really had to think about that because I was paid
Mm.
like so well compared to my peers. And so in a way it was really humbling because it was this moment where I just landed, I was budgeting hard, but it was the happiest moment ever because I was in this beautiful country on this beautiful island, and I was actually happy. I didn't have the Sunday fear anymore. And I was like staying in some places that in my banking career I wouldn't have stayed in, right? And it
Yeah.
was just like it was the most humbling time. And I just felt like that was the first time when I really connected to this sense of adventure, this sense of, oh, now I can be creative because I can actually hear myself think because I'm feeling happier. And Bali is so beautiful for anyone who is listening. It's so full of nature and so expansive. And, I walk on the beach every morning, and that just even that just expands your mind and gives you the space to be creative versus being in like the concrete jungle in London where it's really hard to even hear yourself think, right? So that's kind of what happened when I first landed. The other thing is 3 months later, the pandemic hit. So that wasn't part of the plan for me. But really, initially, I was like, right, I need to think of a business idea because I wanted to get this income going. And my big fear was having to go back to banking. 'Cause in one way, it was like, oh, it's okay. My fallback is going back into banking. What's wrong with that? Like, that's my fallback. So it's not really a risk. But also inside, I knew how much I hated it. So that was my biggest fear at the same time. So
Right.
I really felt a big fire to like create something. So first of all, I was just jumping around, just networking with different people. There's lots of co-working spaces here, seeing what jobs people needed me to do. I did random stuff like I mean, I've always had a sales background. I did random things like calling someone's leads for this straw company and things like
Yeah.
that. And I was just like, what am I doing? But it almost felt rebellious. It was so much fun. So I was jumping around, learning all these skills. Something else that was quite significant was I started doing the operations for a swimwear brand. So I learned how to use Shopify. I learned how e-commerce worked. And I was being paid like the equivalent of like 20 quid an hour, which was
Oh, okay.
which compared to like my London
Hmm.
salary was completely different. But For me, I
Right.
was like, this is an investment in myself. This is an
Hmm.
investment. I'm learning all these skills. And then I founded an e-commerce business after that. So that helped me launch my glasses business. So I launched a blue light glasses business, launched a Shopify website, sold those. I had like a charity model that kind of gave me the purpose piece. But what I really learned about e-commerce is that it takes a long time before you're going to be able to pay yourself sustainably, especially when the product is like I was selling them for about £45. So you need to
Right.
sell a lot of those to be able to pay yourself. There's lots of costs involved in e-commerce because of the stock. And so I was learning all these things as I went, and I was like, this is going to take some cash up front to keep this going. Facebook ads, stock. This is also going to take some time. I don't have time and I don't have that level of capital. So this business model isn't going to work for me. So I also had a remote job at the time, working in a crypto startup that I managed to randomly get here, which was almost like replicating my London career in Bali. So I was like, right, I'm gonna have to quit this business. Um, so I kind of failed fast, if you like. That's what I call it. I failed fast. I was like, e-commerce is not the business model for me. Meanwhile, my job was super, super intense. It was like real startup environment. And I realized quite quickly, after a year of doing that, that your problems can follow you, even if you do live on a tropical island. I'd really replicated my Canary Wharf banking career from an air-conditioned room in Bali. And I was still feeling like I couldn't be present, still feeling super stressed. And I was like, okay, a remote job isn't the answer either. So what I did was I quit that job and I went into freelancing. So I started freelancing for coaches, for communities, for memberships, and I was building their sales strategies. I was writing their sales copy for their sales pages, their sales emails, doing their launches, like consulting, all of these sorts of things, but for a very low rate because I was freelancing. And then when I started to see the money that I was making, like I would send an email out and like make thousands of dollars from that email for these clients, I suddenly was like, hold on a minute, I'm in the wrong chair. I
Right.
need to be running one of these businesses and
Light
I
bulb
should be
moment.
charging this and making this impact. Yeah,
Hmm.
bulb moment. And so that's when I stopped freelancing and actually decided to create Female Leadership Collective, which started with a podcast, actually. So it's ironic that we're on
Amazing.
this podcast today,
Right.
but it's an amazing way to start. So that is the story.
That is so amazing. And thank you for going through all of the detail and nuances. I think it's really powerful for people to hear the complete journey, I guess, because I think sometimes we hear stories which are inspiring, but it's also a bit demotivating at the same time because they get presented very much as overnight success. I had the $1 million idea and I did that and everything was perfect. And I think hearing the kind of journey and the trial and error is incredible. And also for me, it was really powerful to hear you talk about getting to Bali and finding it quite humbling that actually you suddenly weren't earning anything near your corporate salary, but actually you were really happy. That separation or that realization that you can find fulfillment and actually enjoy your life more when it's not necessarily tied to somebody else's idea of success. Perhaps, perhaps salary is really, money is important to all of us to some degree, right? Money is an enabler, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think sometimes there's conditioning that success has to look a certain way, you have to make a certain amount of money, but actually it's really nice to kind of hear your story and how you found that your sort of identity and your fulfillment can come from something else separated from that. I know a lot of our listeners as well will be mums, so I think that is a very different journey, but it often triggers those same kinds of feelings that all of a sudden you might be on mat leave or not working and at home with your kids, and suddenly you don't have that salary and you don't have that status in inverted commas that you once had, and it can be a bit of a oh, like what's going on? But actually, you can really use it as an opportunity to find fulfillment elsewhere.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's such an amazing point, and I think I'm so grateful. This is probably my biggest lesson from that finance career, that money doesn't equal happiness, because I really had the path laid out for me. And I realized fairly quickly, like in my 20s, that not like that the money doesn't make you happy, and actually you need to figure out what actually does make you happy. But in this world we all need to make money. That's just how it works. That's how this world is set up. So you need to figure out, okay, what actually makes me happy, and then how can I make money that allows for that. Whereas where I was stuck in the finance career was what actually makes me happy. There was no room for that in that finance career. So what I had was money, but I didn't have any of the happiness. So I think really that's what I was trying to solve for by creating this business. Okay, so when I landed in Bali and I was budgeting and all of that, I started to learn what made me feel happy. And then when I learned what made me feel happy, then I could start to like create an income model or a business around that, if that makes sense. So that's such
Yeah.
a massive thing to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really powerful part of the way you work as well. I know when you're coaching women, one of the first things you kind of look at is what availability do you have? What do you want your life to look like? How much time do you actually want to be working? And there's no right answer to that. You're not sort of expecting somebody to say, I'm going to hustle 9 till 9, Monday to Friday. Your whole ethos is if you just have a couple of hours on a Monday and a couple of hours on a Friday, then you can build a business to support those life goals. And, whether that's because you want to live a kind of traveling lifestyle, whether that's because you have kids and you need your business to be flexible, or just hobbies and interests to pursue, right? Like it's perfectly valid to have things that you want in your life that aren't your work, and you can actually do both. And I think that's an amazing thing about how you kind of structure, starting that process for people.
Yeah, I love that you make that point, because that's so, so important. I'm not one of those coaches that's here's the strategy and this is what you've got to do. Like, I really have to take time to see the person's unique situation. Like, when we work together, really understanding, okay, how much do you want to work? How much can you work with your kids, right? Because the problem is, if you set yourself up to work, if you set yourself up by creating a business model that doesn't match up to the amount of availability that you have, you're setting yourself up for failure. But not only that, you're going to get yourself down, because I know what high achieving women are like. We really want to like achieve. We want to do the best thing. We want to work really hard, and we work really hard at anything that we apply ourselves to. But then the problem is, if you're unrealistic with your design, then you're just going to feel burnt out, and you're never going to feel like you're successful, because you're just setting yourself up for failure. So for sure, this is so important. If all you've got is 2 hours a week, we have to work with 2 hours a week. And maybe that means your business doesn't grow quite as fast as someone who has 40 hours a week, for
Right.
example. But who cares? Because chances are your version of happiness or success is having a family, and that's a massive priority to you. And so your business isn't necessarily number one priority. Maybe the business is a tool for making some money, giving you some purpose, but it's not necessarily the number one priority. Because I think this is the thing that people miss a lot of the time, is that it's not the business that makes you happy. The business is a tool to
Right.
help you feel this overall level of happiness. And the business is a tool for you to feel the safety that we're going to go into, right? By like earning the money and things like that. So it's like we need to almost put less emphasis on the business and taking more of a holistic view of, okay, what's going to make me happy? Do I want to be a mum? Okay, yes. Well, I need to spend my energy and capacity on being a mum and looking after my kids and feeling the enjoyment and really like soaking that in about how grateful I am to be a mum, because that is what is going towards my life goal and my happiness and that kind of thing. And then the business can fit in around that. It doesn't mean that it needs to be number one all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really powerful perspective shift, because I think so many of us grow up with this kind of, I suppose the very standard model is we get a professional sort of job or an established career working for somebody else. And I know that I had advice. I'd be interested actually to see if you were ever told anything similar at JP Morgan. I trained at Allen and Overy, which is one of the top global law firms. They're now A&O Shearman. And the advice that a woman and mother gave to us sort of young women was that you should, even if you plan and want to have children, you should work like you're not going to and get as far as you can, and you can deal with the issue in inverted commas of taking time out to have children later. And I think this kind of idea that you have to put work first and that's number one, I think it's really nice to kind of listen to people talk about a slightly new way of looking at things where you can do both. You don't just have to have kids or just have a career and fit your kids around and barely see them. You can find a way to marry the two. And I think a lot of people, myself included, you can work like you don't have children and then wake up one day and look around and be like, I have kids and I want to spend time with them, and being in this position where what is expected from you is, you're considered lucky if you get to leave the office and do nursery pickup, but then you have to log back in and work until 4 a.m. That's, that doesn't resonate with me and how I want to live my life. And I think a lot of people are kind of finding that. So I think kind of designing it around you is such an interesting point. And you've spoken before about working with coaches and mentors for your business and actually planning ahead to when you want to have children in the future, right? So kind of, could you speak a little bit to that and actually your kind of reverse approach of building a business already that sets you up for that kind of goal and that kind of flexibility, instead of pretending like it's, far off in the future and ignoring it and then dealing with it then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a good thing to mention here is the moment that I realized that I needed to leave the finance industry. And this was when I had a director who I really looked up to. She was one of those role models I learned. She taught me so much about sales. I really saw myself in her and I wanted to be her in the future. And she has three wonderful kids. She had a husband that was running a trading desk at another bank. They were such a power couple and I just really admired her. And she said to me, I don't think I'll ever get to the top level in there's 5 levels in banking. I don't think I'll ever get to the top level because I've got a flexible working arrangement. I would need to sacrifice that and go full time to be eligible for a promotion. And obviously that's not written down, but it's like an unwritten kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And she would work from home on a certain day. And I just thought to myself, wow, if that's what she thinks, if the environment has made her think that, and also there was a woman in charge, by the way, at the time, if that's what she thinks, then I'm in the wrong place because that's not a battle that I even want to fight. I'm never going to win in that battle. And I think to your point of what you were just talking about then, if we look at our lives as women, and if being a mom is a big, important part of that to us, then we have to take that seriously in a way. Well, we definitely do. I mean, career gets such a high weighting and such a high significance and importance. And I think this is because still relatively recent since women have been able to have these opportunities in these kinds of careers. So when you're fortunate enough to land yourself one of these jobs, and you would know this, you almost feel this pressure to stay there and to prove it and to prove that you can do it amongst the men, right? And you feel like you're screwing up for all of the women if you don't stay there and you don't prove yourself. But actually, really, sometimes we have to just admit that these corporations weren't necessarily built for mums. They weren't built for women because they weren't built by women. And so we have to kind of accept that actually, if being a mum is really important to us, then maybe we might need to prioritize that more and put less weighting on the career. Or we can leave it and go and create our own business and allow that to be super flexible so that we can be the boss. We don't have to be, stuck underneath these unwritten rules of these cultures, and we can promote ourselves because we're in charge of our business. We can make rules. And that's really where my belief comes from and why I created my business, because I really believe that actually in this day and age, I think it can change, but not in our lifetime. Like in this day and age, women cannot flourish in these corporations and be a mum and do it all. It's just not set up for them. So this is why I believe the best way is for women to break out, launch their own businesses, create their own cultures, create their own rules, and then they have their own flexibility around that, and they can create their own version of what that means and what success means and what career means, whilst also being the mum that they want to be. They don't have to sacrifice that either. They don't need to come into the office on a Friday when they don't want to, right? Just to show face or to get the promotion. They don't need to make decisions like that. So that's a big, big driver for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it can get into quite a thorny topic as well, can't it? Because I know, there's this tension of we want to have it all, or a lot of women want to have both careers and children. And if you talk about the origins of certain businesses, being built by men and it being a predominantly male culture, sometimes people want to shoehorn to fit into that. And I think if you enjoy it and you're genuinely thriving and loving life within that system, absolutely, all power to those women. But I do think a lot of women, like you said, are feeling pressure to show they're thriving or pretend that we're loving it and we can make it all compatible, when actually it's not what we want. I had never given a second thought before I had kids to the fact that even if they're in childcare from 9 till 6, which is what the majority of childminders and nurseries will run, that for a working day at a law firm or in finance, for example, that's kind of the bare minimum, right? And so you're then very lucky to go and do pickup and then quickly put them to bed and then log back in the evening. And it's just such a tension. And for me, putting my kids to bed is not the only contact I want to have with them. I don't enjoy that kind of setup enough. If somebody does, then obviously that's, a way that they're going to have to make their decisions, right? But like you're saying, if you value sort of spending more time with your family and you also want a career, then perhaps looking at different models and different ways of building more flexibility into your life is the way to do it. And obviously that's what you've been helping so many women to do in all kinds of different circumstances, which is incredible. Are there particular things that you've had in mind or sort of tackled within your business with a view to building in that kind of freedom and flexibility for motherhood down the line? Are there sort of special things that you've done and prioritized for that?
Yeah, I think I've seen other mums, and I've like role models like you, for example, Bryony, and I see, okay, how like realistically, how is this going to impact my life? Well, what I can imagine is that suddenly you've got this beautiful creature who is number one and you are responsible for, and that overtakes absolutely everything. So that means that your work needs to be so flexible that it can work around you. And so I also pair this with the goal of like, it's my dream to have work as being optional, because that's the ultimate goal, right? And the thing is with corporate, you're trading your time for money. So you need to keep working if you want to make money. That's just how the model works. Whereas if you have your own business, you can get away from that kind of model of trading time for money, and it can start to be more passive, which means that, you can be making money in your sleep, or you could be making money whilst you're enjoying time with your kids, whatever that looks like for you. So there is a way to do that, but not all business models are created equal in that sense. So I was looking for something where there was a clear path for work to be optional. So it is a business model where things can be highly automated it can be really scaled. We can leverage technology so that I don't have to be physically present to do a lot of the tasks. But also something that is just super scalable from a monetary point of view as well. So something where, so I learned this from the e-commerce. I don't have to sell like hundreds of thousands of units to make a lot of money. So I'm like, okay, what kind of product can I sell that is a high ticket product so that, 5 sales could make me 10K, for example, or something like that. So that was also something I was looking for. The other thing was something where it allowed me to work from anywhere. So this could be from the motivation of I want to travel the world and I want to work from my laptop. But equally, it could be from the lens of I want to be able to work from home because I'm a mom of two or whatever, so that I can just open my laptop there and then if I need to do something. So it was having that kind of flexibility. So all of those things, I was like, these are really important things. So my business model has to answer to those things. And one other important thing was I didn't want to have a board of investors. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be in charge. So for me, you know, I would rather make less money, but have a team of maybe like 3 and have complete control over my business and where it's going and the decisions and how I work than have a multi-million dollar tech company or something with this board of investors and have to answer to them and really lose a lot of control. That was so important to me when I was thinking of business ideas at the start. And I think this is absolutely critical for any mums who are thinking of trying to get away from trading their time for money and trying to create a business. You've really got to think about what is the criteria that allows me to show up as the mum that I want to be and like reverse engineer it and work backwards and then say, okay, well, this business model's not going to work then. I can't run an in-person yoga studio. That's not going to work. I'm just theoretical. So for me, I really landed on online business, but in the digital services space. So this is things like coaching. This is things like community. This is things like memberships, courses, this kind of stuff, because it's so great for especially mums as well. And you know this too, that creating a course or coaching or community gives you that amazing sense of purpose, but it also allows you to charge high ticket as well so that you can be making a good income, but you don't actually have to make that many sales. So you don't need to have a massive audience to make good money from the start. Like just to put this into context, and people are so surprised. On my first month in business, obviously I was building my community, doing my podcast for a few months beforehand. But when I first launched, in that month, I made 10K in month 1. I would never have been able to do that with my e-commerce business selling my glasses for 45 quid, right? I would never have been able to do that. And I had a small audience of like probably under 1,000 people at that time. So really, these business models are perfect for women who want more flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such a valuable piece to kind of emphasize for people, because I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in the idea of, okay, great, I want to start a business, dictate my hours, make it flexible, and then sort of not know where to go or potentially have ideas, but not drill down into the financials and also the time that means for you in your lifestyle, right? So if you're selling a product, I think sometimes people forget to think, okay, so upfront costs, et cetera, but also let's break it down to what does this product cost per unit and how many of those do I need to sell regularly to make the amount that I need to make monthly, and then also think about all the costs involved in that. That's quite an intensive and expensive process, and it's difficult as well in this day and age because there are so many businesses and manufacturers and things who can do things at scale. So if you're a single startup, to compete in that space with that type of thing is really difficult. I don't know about you, but my algorithm at the moment, because I do sort of speak about business and motherhood sometimes, is full of people who have created courses to teach mums to make income, but they are teaching digital product sales or sort of products that are super, super low ticket. And I'm not sort of invalidating that, because obviously, you know, you'll know how valid that can be as a strategy to support different things. But I think it often misses that if you are starting a business for yourself from the word
So
go.
there's always this metric that I always bang on about, and you've heard me talk about this before, Bryony, as well. And that is that 2% of your email list typically convert to buyers. And this is so much lower than people realize. And so many coaches don't realize this either. But it's actually really great because it means your business can be predictable. And it's really just maths. So what this means is, let's say you had 100 people on your email list. If you did a launch of a product, on average, 2 people from that 100 would buy that product. So
Right.
if the product was priced at 50 quid, you're making 100 quid. If that product was priced at £5,000, that's a 10K month. So you can
Mhm.
see how, if you're someone with a smaller audience or you're starting from zero, it makes far more sense to go for a high ticket product than to go for a low ticket product. It's going to take you years to build up the traffic, or it's going to be very expensive to build up that volume of traffic from ads and things to be able to make any money. And the thing is, the objection I get hit with from clients is, oh, but how could I possibly give value for that amount of money? How could I possibly sell for thousands of dollars? But the thing is, it is easier for me to help you get over your sales mindset and get confident to charge that price than it is for you to make a good amount of money from a low ticket product. So we want to go for, working on the mindset stuff. And then that's, that's the way that you can be making good money from very relatively early on with this business model. So yeah, you're so right. Like the lower ticket thing, people assume that it's easier to sell low ticket than it is high ticket. And that's just an absolute myth. It's really not. There's buyers at all levels of the market. So it makes sense to help you get confident enough to sell high ticket.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think as women, often there's a lot of conditioning around money and feeling confident to talk about it, first of all, before you even get into the charging people. I think an interesting way, perhaps, to look at it, because I can imagine so many mums being like, oh my God, then it's not for me, because how can I, sat at home wanting to start a business on my mat leave so I can be with my kids, how can I charge someone a couple of £1,000s for something? But you're not talking about just pulling a number out of the air and seeing how many people you can just get to pay you. It's about delivering value, right? So low ticket things don't cost very much money because they don't add much value. So your task is to create a business or an experience or a service or a transformation for a client, whatever it is, that is going to deliver them that value. And so that exchange literally is just that, right? It's like a transfer of, they give you that money because they really want what it is that you're providing. And obviously that's the work that you do, is help people get over that mindset stuff that makes the money stuff feel icky and awkward, but also make sure that it's not like, I think a lot of people think these things are like those pyramid marketing schemes. Do you know what I mean? I think it can get a bit of a reputation for being that kind of slightly sleazy, like money scam kind of thing. And it's actually just about delivering something that is so good, it is worth people, paying that money for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just stepping into those buyers' shoes. We've all been buyers, so stepping into that other side of it. And I can give an example. So before I launched this business, I spent £5,000 on a course, and this course taught me sales funnels. And I knew I was going to use that as a business coach to help my clients to make myself money. So I was going to get what you call ROI, return on investment. I was going to make a lot more money than that £5,000, which I have done. But at the time, I was like, wow, this is so much money. But I paid it because I felt like that was my ticket to launch a business, to be able to charge a good amount of money for my services. So I invested in myself, I invested in my knowledge, I invested in my skills. And because I have a 10 years of sales background, but it wasn't necessarily specific to this niche, that's why I learned sales funnels. So that really, spending that £5,000 unlocked the ability for me to launch my own business, stay in Bali, work online. Now I can go wherever I want with my work. Also, I hit six figures, right? So the investing at that level really, really helped me. I don't think, I mean, try and get that kind of return on investment for like you're not going to get that from a 50 quid like masterclass, are you? So really, this is how you can see the different levels of value from these different price points, right? So it's like, what value do you put on that transformation? So we need to come up with a transformation that is big enough that you can charge that price for. And also, the wonderful thing about this as well is that a lot of women are not only looking for a way to make income, but they're looking for a way to feel purpose as well. And so when you're
Absolutely.
creating a transformation that is bigger, you feel so much more purpose. Like, it's questionable to feel that much purpose from like an ebook that you create, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, people can get some great transformations. But when someone, and I've had this from clients, turn around, say to me, "You changed my life," like on my retreat, people have turned around and said that to me, and they've paid me thousands of dollars to join that retreat. If I hadn't have got the confidence to put that out there, that would never have happened. And that was possibly one of my most proudest moments in business. Like, it really felt there was so much purpose there. So yeah, I'm just trying to give like a little bit of an Oprah motivational speech to your listeners to really get confident enough that you can provide an incredible transformation for people and you can charge these prices, but it's just really thinking bigger, thinking deeper, because actually that's your way to get there faster.
Was it possibly on Instagram a long time ago? You've just reminded me. I'm sure I saw you say somewhere that actually your blue light glasses business, right? From selling a pair of those, it's like, yay, cool, I'm doing something in my own business. But that feeling for you isn't the kind of feeling of somebody telling you that you have literally transformed their life. And so it's about what you get out of it too, not just in terms of monetary value, right? But how much fulfillment do you get from your work? And when you're kind of working on that higher ticket value, you are giving people so much more. And that's actually something that's really satisfying for people to do, because it's not just sort of, you're doing a small thing for somebody, you're delivering something that is really incredible.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I remember the exact post that you're talking about, because in that e-commerce business, it was like these blue light glasses, right? And if you don't know what they are, they really help to stop headaches and things like that. And people would buy them, and then I would get an email saying, "Oh, thank you so much, you cured my headaches." But then I would never hear from that customer again. And that was wonderful for that moment. But I was really looking for more purpose than that, more of an impact. And so that was a big reason as to why I stopped that business as well. Because I was like, I want to make a deeper transformation. I want to go deeper with these clients, and I can't if I'm just selling blue light glasses.
Yeah, because I guess for a lot of mums as well, if you're going to be working and spending time away from your kids, you want to be sure that actually, a lot of the piece will be money. For a lot of people, they might need to work to afford things and, fund their family, right? But there's also a piece of, if I'm away from my family, I want to be enjoying what I'm doing. I want it to be something that fulfills me and gives me some sense of purpose, and I derive some satisfaction from, right? So yeah, I think that's such an interesting kind of way to look at it, and may hopefully helpful for people to kind of get around that feeling of, oh, can I really charge for what it is I'm doing? So what would you say to somebody then, if you've got a mum or not a mum, or someone who wants to be one day, or just wants to go traveling and, build that flexible business? What would you say to somebody who is kind of in that position that you were right at the start? So they they maybe don't have that business idea yet. They're not really sure what they want to do. They just know that the goal is some level of freedom and flexibility, and also that kind of safety piece of they want to make some money, but also enjoy themselves, be able to show up as them.
Yeah. So the first thing is a mindset thing, actually. So you just kind of need to step into the mindset that I can do this and almost make a decision that this is going to be real. No, it's not just, oh, maybe one day I can do this. It's no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to figure it out. Because I spent years waiting for that, thinking one day I'm going to do that. And that one day just doesn't happen. You have to make this conscious decision. You have to consciously say, right, I'm doing this now. I'm going to figure it out. And then the next thing I would say is you need to think about what it is that you're going to do. And so many people are like, they say to me, oh, I really, really want to run a business, but I've just got no idea what I do. And they just stay stuck in that. And they're just sort of waiting for this big transformational idea to just suddenly pop into their head. And it doesn't need to be like that. Sometimes that happens, but just very rarely. So what I typically teach people to do when they're in that situation is to really think about, what do people come to them naturally for? What do people ask them for advice on all the time? Like, what do friends and family ask them for? Like, what do they really excel in that sense through giving advice? But also, what do they just naturally gravitate towards? What do they love to do? Maybe in their group of friends, do they typically organize events all the time, or are they the person that they provide a shoulder to cry on? Like, what is your natural role in society, and what do you really, really love? Because the chances are that that is what you can build a business around, and that is what will come naturally to you, and that is what you'll be really gifted at. And that, when you build a business around something like that, that's when it becomes really magnetic, and making the money and giving the client results comes really easily. So that would be my one tip. Sometimes people are like, well, I can't think of anything. So then I say, well, think about, okay, your corporate experience. So I don't know if the majority of your listeners have come from a corporate background, but if it's not corporate, what work experience do you have? Because even if you wanted to leave your career, it doesn't mean that it's wasted. There's so much that we've learned in those careers that we can market in a course. Or so let's give an example. Let's say you work in marketing. Well, there's a certain specific niche part of marketing that you have so many years of experience in, that maybe you've been helping massive corporations do, and that's not really been fulfilling you. But what about if you then took that skill and helped small businesses or mum owned businesses with that same skill? And really, they really only need to know the basics, right? So it can be that simple, it can be that easy, and you're already skilled enough to be able to teach and charge that. So there's when I kind of I get so excited, because when I kind of talk about these things, then people have ideas, and then it just becomes so obvious to them what they could do. And that almost, I call it like birthing an idea. It really does feel like birthing and bring something to creation, which is so wonderful. It's like the most wonderful moment in like a client's life cycle when I work with people. So I'm hoping whilst people are listening to this, they're starting to have some of those ideas of what they could do.
Yeah, I love that. It's really great to hear you kind of speak to that process, because I think a lot of the time you hear people talk about starting a business and you get a lot of the motivational stuff, but then everybody gets stuck at that kind of, but what would I do? I don't know. I don't have an idea. Oh, do I just have to wait for it to pop into my head? So that's really nice to kind of set out that process for people. And obviously, you know, in your journey as an entrepreneur, you've done so many different things, but actually where you've ended up, none of that has been wasted. Even if you're not selling blue light glasses anymore, or you're not selling financial products for a bank anymore, but there's so much that you can draw on from all of the different places you've been.
Yeah, there's so much. There are a million business ideas that you could have and you could do really, really well. And this is an important point as well. It does get to a point where you will never know if it's the perfect idea. So actually, you do just need to make a decision and just go with it, because entrepreneurship is all just a series of decisions. And the faster you can make them, the faster you can start refining, because you cannot know whether you're going to enjoy doing something or it's going to be successful unless you just try it and see. You just cannot know that. So you have to just you just have to try it, and it's fluid, right? You could start with one niche and then realize, oh, I'm not kind of enjoying that, so I'm going to adjust, or people are asking me this question, so I'm going to pivot. And your business can be an evolution. So just because you decided it was going to be one thing doesn't mean that you're fixed and married to that the whole time, because this is a big thing that people get caught up on. So just knowing that, yeah, I'm just going to pick something, give it a go, see how I feel, adjust as I go along, and I can change it because I'm in control, I'm in charge, I'm the boss, which is such a wonderful thing.
That kind of fluidity as well, it can be a bit helpful in making you feel like nothing is permanent, right? So as you say, you can just go with that evolution, see where it takes you, learn along the way, and there's always room to pivot, there's always room to make changes. I think that kind of nicely leads into something I wanted to ask you, actually, the risk of getting a little bit weird, but I think that there have been increasingly interesting conversations in the business space around femininity and feminine energy. But the idea is, a different approach and a sort of softer living, I suppose, way of doing business. How do you feel about those kinds of concepts in the business space? And, do you teach those concepts? How do you kind of apply it? If so, and how do you work with clients on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have quite strong opinions on this, but it comes from my own personal experience. So this is my truth, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's someone else's experience, doesn't necessarily mean that it's their truth, but I speak on these topics because lots of people say that it does resonate. So for me, going into banking, a lot of supposedly what people link being feminine qualities, this softness that you're talking about, slowing down, emotions, managing emotions, but in a really like superpower way, right? Like we have this ability to read people, empathy, all of these things. People say that women have this in abundance, and we are different, we're biologically different, we have different hormones governing us, so of course we're going to have different strengths on the whole, and men are going to have different strengths. So the challenge though was that when I was in the finance industry, it felt like a lot of these qualities that are associated with being female were seen as being very weak, and there was no place for them. But also, I don't mean that this in a blaming way at all. It's just kind of natural from the evolution of the space being very like male dominated. When you look at who's at the top, it's men. So then you're going to try and copy what they're doing, what their language is, how they're behaving, how they're talking. Like everybody knows those one word answer emails from the managing directors that just sound so aggressive when you first start working in those careers. And you start to do that, and you start to use less, you start to speak more monotone, you start to I was told like to tie my hair up in meetings so that I didn't play with it too much and things like that.
Yeah, like don't touch your hair because people won't take you seriously, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned that to be successful, I needed to emulate more masculine traits because that's what I saw ahead of me. And so over years and years and years, I kind of conditioned away, and I was scared to feel feminine or show up in a feminine way. But then the problem with this is when you then leave an industry like that, and you because what that created for me was feeling super numb in my body, like not feeling myself. And then when you leave an industry like that and you realize, okay, I don't want to get further in that career, but maybe I want to meet a partner, or maybe I want to be a mum, or maybe I want to just, feel authentic. Then I needed to feel safe embracing those qualities because those were a big part of me. And that was a whole journey kind of tapping into that. And now I'm at a space where I run my own business, so I can now lead in the way that I want to lead, and I can give examples of what that looks like. And you can call that feminine if you want, but that is, I might cry on a Zoom call with my clients because they made me cry happy tears, right? I might put kisses at the end of an email. Like I sign my
Yeah.
emails off with love, and then I put like XOXO, and it's almost like it's like a joke, and it's like a
Hmm.
rebellious thing for me that I don't need to write kind regards or best anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's just an example. That's an
I love
example.
that.
Like I can create softness. I can create like that a space. I can create a space that feels like how I want to make it feel. And you can say what you can make a link to that being feminine
Hmm.
energy or whatever, but what it means to me is it just feels authentic to me.
Yeah. So you can show up as yourself without somebody saying, that's not professional. Conduct yourself in this way if you want to be taken seriously, right?
Yeah, of course. It's about not suppressing things. So we want everyone, like I would love for women to be able to show up as the leaders that they want to be and not suppress any parts of themselves, because those parts give them superpowers, but also
Mm.
those parts will allow them to actually feel how they want to feel in life because they're living life in an authentic way as them, and they're not suppressing anything. Because if you're suppressing something, that's when you're not going to feel the happiness, the joy that you're really looking for. So we have to really get to a point where we feel safe to lead in the way that we're not suppressing any parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I think like in those kinds of industries, there is obviously, there's a huge improvement in the numbers of women working in finance and in law and, all kinds of areas, right? But like you said, I think these things have been set up by men historically. And so to succeed in those industries, there's a huge amount of suppression of yourself or of mimicking, whether you want to call them masculine or whatever, mimicking the ways that other people behave. The emails you talked about are a great example. I've read my husband per email and also emails that got sent to me when I worked in law, like one word things, it feels super abrupt. Like I want to use niceness and like a little bit of conversation and politeness. And I don't think that makes me weak, but I have been
Mhm.
told in the past that it's not professional. Whereas I think what you're talking about here, just showing up authentically, is amazing. It's really, really relevant for mums too, because I know there's a huge tension for a lot of working mums of, you know, doing the drop off, for example, with kids. And it can be quite emotional. It's hard to leave screaming little ones who don't want to leave you. And to then have to put this big, right, I'm
Wow.
fine, absolutely fine, not feeling emotional, just going to operate, all systems go now, and make that switch as soon as you get to the office is really hard for people. And yeah, I think this kind of paradigm shift of moving towards embracing all of those things and being authentic is really important for everybody.
Yeah, wow. When you put it like that, I can't, that my heart goes out. Like I don't even you don't even think of these things until that happens to you. That the biggest thing I like to say that makes people understand what I'm talking about is imagine if we lived in a different world and the corporate world was created by women. Like how do we think
Mm.
if it was a women dominated space, how do we think that would look? How would it feel? What would be different? And I think instantly everybody's mind goes, yeah, that would be very different. Like it's even hard to
Yeah.
imagine, right? So that when you think about it like that, that's just what I'm saying. It's just statistics. And what I would love to see is a place where it's equal at the top, but women are being women so that all these behaviors are allowed. There's a space for that, and people can play to their strengths, and it's kind of fluid in that way rather than people suppressing it and masking these emotions and pretending that they weren't just crying like 20 minutes ago, because being a mum is hard sometimes, right? And one of the most
Yeah.
important, well, the most important job in the world because we're literally continuing the human race. So it's like, why should you have to hide any of that? That should be supported.
It's interesting as well, isn't it? How I assume, the reason we're told that it needs to be kind of hidden and we need to emulate this kind of professional blank, non-emotional, etc. kind of persona is to be professional. But what does that mean, right? Because, your business is really successful and you're doing great. And the world isn't falling down because you decide one day that you need things to be a bit more fluid and to take a morning off or to touch your hair when you're on a call with a client, god forbid. All of these things that in corporate you're kind of trying to get away from, actually they do not make you any better or worse at your job. Well, they probably do make you better because you're showing up more fully as yourself, right? But you can still be successful and have a great career, run a great business, and be emotional, be who you are.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't want to be bound to any of those unwritten rules or any of those cultural rules that I didn't agree with. So that the only option I did see was to create my own business so I could create my own rules, my own culture, hire who I wanted to hire, work with who I wanted to work with, and not have a boss that was telling me all of these kind of like BS rules about things that I just didn't want to follow. So for me, I saw that as the only way I could do that.
You've obviously come such a long way. As we kind of, I'm conscious of your time. What would you say is your kind of vision and hope for the next evolution of your business, or where you're wanting to go going forward?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I actually find enjoyment in the fact that I don't know. And
Amazing.
I love that because
Yeah.
I love that where I'm at now as well is that everything in my life is I've got it to the point that where I wanted it to be. When people say, "Where do you
Yeah.
want to be in 5 years' time?" I want to be here. I just want to be here. Yeah, I could amplify things. I could do things a bit bigger, but I've managed to position myself into like living in a place I love, having a home that I love, running a business that I love, and this kind of thing. So really, I just continue and do more of that and create more freedom in my life. So that to me is the plan. I don't have any, I'm not driven anymore by status or hitting $1 million or like these kinds of things that don't have meaning behind them. My goal is a feeling and how I want to feel. And I'm in that position now. So I just want to continue on with that and have more experiences and more adventures. Kind of sounds a little bit vague, but for me, that is actually important because the past is where I had all these rigid goals that didn't really mean anything. And
Mm.
look where I ended up. I wasn't happy. So for
Yeah.
me, I don't know the answer to that question. And that's really exciting.
That's amazing. No, I love that. I love that. Just to kind of wrap up, we always ask our guests these final three questions. So, what do you do that you do just for you?
So I've always loved reading, and I think you're the same, Bryony. And
Bookworm.
I so every day I'll take a little bit of time to read, and I just love that. And that is time for me. And, sometimes nonfiction, sometimes fiction, but like that's my little time and space where I can just get lost in that.
I love them. And what has been your biggest revelation about motherhood? So we might need to tweak this question slightly for you if you want. I mean, you can answer it as is if you like. I'm conscious that you're not there right this second. So if you want, it could be sort of your vision for motherhood or your sort of biggest hopes for motherhood.
I think, and also what I would say to all the moms out there is not to shy away from how important a role it is and how important a
Mm,
job it is. And not to shy away from if that's the most important thing in your life, then own it. Like it should be the most important thing in your life. There should be no shame around that. There should be no, um, you know, there should be like for some reason it's sometimes in society not seen as being it, like, sometimes the way you described it earlier around the mat leave and things, it's almost seen as a nuisance to a career. But
Right.
actually, no, if that's your priority in life, that should be a priority. And how freaking amazing is it that you can create life and like bring them up, and how wonderful. And so that for me is a revelation, but also something that I would love for all mums to kind of own more, and just
Mm.
feel really good in that.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. And then finally, what legacy or impact do you hope to leave behind? So obviously that's a bit of a deep one, but it can be personal, business, parenting, like any, however you would view that.
I think to have women feel confident to show up in this world in an authentic way, in a way that they're who they truly are, and just having the confidence in that, and not feeling pressure to prove themselves in any way in a career that they don't want to be in not having to hide emotions, like you said about dropping your kid off at school and then walking to the office and trying to mask those emotions. I would love for women to be able to show up in this world and have the confidence to show up as who they truly are. That would be, I mean, it's tricky, it's challenging, I get it, because society's not set up like that, but that would be like a huge, if I could change that for a few women, like that would make me happy.
Thank you so much for your time today. I feel like we have covered so many things, and this is going to be amazing for listeners just to delve into. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about your work, your coaching, your amazing retreats? I really, really want to go on one of those. That's my bucket list goal for when I've stopped breastfeeding. So, your amazing Bali retreat, and yeah, socials, everything. Where can we get you?
Oh, I would love to have you in Bali. Yeah, so I've got various courses, programs, and my Bali retreats. So you can find me on Instagram at Female Leadership Collective. And I would love, like, please DM me and say hi and say you listen to this podcast, because I love to chat to everyone and it's me who replies. And also, I have my own podcast as well called Female Leadership Collective. So go and have a look over there. I've done like 115 episodes now, so
Wow,
there's loads
amazing.
of stuff you can just get straight into and learn about business and all of the things that we've been talking about today.
Perfect. Brilliant. And I really recommend her Get the Tea episodes, by the way. I'm obsessed. So on the podcast, those are your little personal updates, and I love them.
Yes. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Bryony. It's been such an honor, and it's always so special to come on someone's podcast, especially someone who I went to school with and who is a client, and it's just so wonderful.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And this podcast wouldn't be happening if it hadn't been masterminded when we were working together. So yeah, so excited and really grateful that we got to have this massive conversation. I think so many bits of gold in there. Thank you so much. That's it for today's episode of the More Than Mama podcast. Thank you so much for listening and being part of our community. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, leave a review, and share with your friends to help us reach more amazing mums like you. Let's continue the conversation. Connect with us on social media at the More Than Mama Pod, and I'm also on there as Bryony Writes on Instagram. It's always great to hear your thoughts, stories, and ideas for future episodes. Chat to you soon.